Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So it's time for another weekly update and I have 8 books to talk to you about today that I finished since last time. And this is a very strong bunch of books, especially with these sci-fi. Before we get started, leave a snowflake emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. So we'll start with the lowest rated book, and that's a 3-star book, which is Reflection by Elizabeth Lim. So I did a buddy read of this with Kat from Brisbane Reviews for the Because We Can readathon. This is one of these like Disney twisted tales, and this tackles Mulan. So basically it asks what happens if Shang is wounded by Shan Yu instead of Mulan, and she ends up having to go to the underworld to save him with the help of his lion guardian. So I think this was decent overall, but it did read younger than YA to me. Like, it felt much more like a middle grade book, which like is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not usually what I tend to read these days. I think it's a really interesting concept, and like, I don't know, I feel like all of these twisted tales in general are kind of interesting. So this obviously mostly takes place in the underworld, and I just really liked seeing this because, you know, we get to see different places within the underworld and different beings in the underworld, and it's like, you know, mythology that I'm not super familiar with, so it's just really cool to learn more about it. I don't think we have the most development in general. I did have some trouble picturing some of the scenes. Like, in particular, there's a scene that takes place on this mountain of knives, and I like could not for the life of me figure out how steep it was, which was just something like, I mean, that doesn't really sound like that big of a deal, but it was something that like kept bothering me, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on here. But, you know, there's some other scenes with a different location in particular that I really liked and thought were pretty cool. I think the middle was a bit slow and repetitive, but the ending did pick up. Several lines in this book are like straight from the movie, and so I was kind of wondering when reading this, I was like, I wonder if Disney just like gives the authors lines from the movies that they have to somehow work in, because that's kind of what it felt like. But at the same time, you know, I think this did make it feel somewhat immersive, and I could certainly picture like the scenes in the movie where these lines come up, so that was fun. I think the beginning in particular is very strong at evoking the movie, like, you know, it's just like straight up a scene from the movie, so I think she did a pretty good job overall of staying true to the movie. We don't get to see Mushu all that much here, but we do have Shishi, who is Shang's guardian, and, you know, is well-meaning, but not the most competent. I think Mulan and Shang feel pretty similar to the movie. In her journey, Mulan does have a moment where she has to, like, spend some time to really figure out who she is and who she wants to be, and I really like seeing this. Like, I feel like we kind of get that a little bit in the movie, but it was interesting to explore it in written form here. I think the ending was a bit more abrupt than I would have cared for. Like, I would have liked to see more with that final battle in like the capital and, you know, going home, but overall, like, this was a fine book, but I feel like I'm just not really the target audience for this. Now we have a 3.5-star book, and that's Fractured Tide by Leslie Karen Lutz. So this is a YA horror book. The premise here is that our main character Sia is out leading a scuba group, but it turns out the boat ends up sinking and there's a creature in the water. She ends up washing up on this deserted island that has secrets of its own, and nothing is quite what it seems. I think the pacing was pretty decent overall with this. I was definitely interested in learning, you know, what all was happening with this mysterious creature in the water. Like, I am always here for a good sea creature in my books. And certainly, like, on the island, I definitely wanted to know what was going on here. Like, you can definitely tell that things are a little off here, and so that was kind of fun, you know, just to figure out what all happened. There's certainly some very bizarre things going on here, but I actually kind of liked it. We do get some fun, creepy moments. I was never truly scared, but I thought these were enjoyable and fun. The format was interesting, so it's basically journal entries from Sia writing to her father, who is not there, and so we do get some of this second-person tense. Now, second-person tense is a really hard sell for me, so this was alright. I don't know if I fully loved it, but it was okay, I guess, for me. It does feel certainly like she is there writing stuff down to him, so, like, I guess it kind of succeeded in that. I liked Sia overall. I think she's very brave, and she does want to save everyone, especially her brother. She is really protective of him and really, like, wants to let him be a kid instead of, you know, having the same experiences as her and growing up too fast. They do have a really sweet bond, and I think that was probably my favorite relationship with the book. We do get a little bit of romance, but I don't think it's really the focus here. Sia is definitely an adrenaline junkie, and she does take some risks, which I'm like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. But I do think it feels pretty realistic with these scuba aspects. We do have a lot of really detailed terms, and like as a scuba diver myself, I really appreciated these. And I was like, okay, yeah, like I know what you're talking about. Like, and I was just browsing some Goodreads reviews, and I did see some people kind of complaining about how technical it is. But for me, you know, like being familiar with this, like I was all about it, and like definitely wanted those details. It also mentions Speckle Grove, which is a wreck off of the coast of Florida, which I've actually gone diving at before. So like I really connected with this particular part a lot. I was like, oh hey, I recognize that. That's cool. So yeah, I think generally it feels like there's really a love for the ocean here. So I just really appreciated this aspect, and I had a really great time with this book overall. So now we'll jump into a 4-star book, and that's Slay by Brittney Morris. So this is a YA contemporary that's basically following Kira, who is this anonymous game developer of Slay, which is this secret online role-playing card game. A teen ends up being murdered in the real world over a dispute in the game, and it, kind of reaches mainstream media. And so Slay ends up being labeled as racist and exclusionist, and we end up having a troll infiltrating the game. So this was really good. It somewhat reminded me of Eliza and Her Monsters, which I read recently, just in that we have this like anonymous creator of this really popular web thing. Like obviously with Eliza it was a webcomic, but here it's this game element. However, that's where the similarity ends. They go in really different directions and the focus is completely different. But I don't know, I also loved Eliza and Her Monsters, so I was like, oh hey, that's kind of, reminds me of that a little bit. I really loved this game and just the concept of dueling with these cards that you get. And so I really liked the variety of cards that they had here and all of their powers. They're all based on real Black people and Black culture. So I particularly liked the Jimi Hendrix card, and like the power is purple haze. And I don't know why this particular one stood out to me the most as like my favorite, but I just really liked all of them in general. I think it's pretty fast paced overall and really engaging. I think it's fantastic to be able to read a book about the Black experience from a Black author. I think it has this really great depiction of being Black and wanting a place to, be yourself that doesn't necessarily cater to white people as well. I think there's a lot of discussion about the pressure of having to explain things and educate white people and just be like the voice of Black people. It's just so nice to read things from own voices authors to just get an idea of, the things that, Black people in particular have to go through. This does a really great job of explaining, a lot of the Black experience to just people in general. But I think speaking as a white person, I think this was really eye-opening and did a just fantastic job. And I feel like I would definitely recommend this for a white audience, wanting to know more about the Black experience. I think this is also just a really great exploration of celebrating Black excellence and just kind of breaking free of this idea that there's only one way to achieve that. I liked Kira, our main character, as well as Claire and Steph. With Kira, I can certainly appreciate her goals, and I like seeing her realize what she wants out of life. She certainly is stuck in this really heartbreaking situation, obviously with this teenager who gets killed, and she's trying to figure out what to do and just deal with her feelings of responsibility. I liked the support she gets from Claire and Steph. I generally appreciated that Claire and Kira are both very intelligent ladies in STEM fields. We also get a few points of view from other characters throughout the book. This worked really well because it allows us to see how the game touches so many lives around the world and is an escape. So overall, I think, this obviously tackles a lot of really big topics, but I think it does it in a really nice way, and, it's easy to read, but we also have these, really cool elements with this VR game, so, I would definitely suggest picking this one up. So then we have a 4.5-star book, and that's Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. So this is an adult sci-fi romance, and we have Prince Kiam, who must marry Count Janin to preserve treaties and alliances in the Empire after Janin's husband dies. However, this death may be a little bit suspicious, so Janin and Kiam must investigate, learn to trust each other, and also prevent war. So this was really lovely. I think it was a wonderful slow burn romance that has some heartbreaking moments. I really enjoyed this plot and, investigating this mystery. I think it's not quite what I anticipated. So I appreciated just learning more about it and this empire in general. We have some fun action scenes, but I think it's much it's generally much more focused on the political schemes and this romance, as well as the character work. I was definitely interested the entire time. I think the big draw for me to keep reading was this relationship. I just like, at times I was like, I wanted them to just like sit down and have a conversation. And when it does happen, it's just like immensely satisfying. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted to happen. We do have a character who is recovering from an abusive relationship. So there are obviously content warnings for this. I had actually completely forgotten about that part. Like, I do, of course, now remember reading it, but I did get the sense pretty much immediately that something along those lines had happened based on his actions. I was just like, oh goodness. It's so heartbreaking. Janin is much more serious and contemplative. I think he's more focused on doing what's proper and like doing his job as a diplomat. He's more academically inclined and does have an advanced degree, so I really liked that. Kim is a sweetheart. He is so lovable and goofy. I think he's less adept at politics, but he's really good with people. And, I think they balance each other out really well. And I just absolutely loved this relationship. We have Kim's aide, Belle, who is really adept at her, like, security job. And I just love how competent she is. And she's kind of, like, not really afraid to call Kim out on any shit that he tries to pull. I think we have a lot of really great diversity in this world. Like, in this empire, people indicate their gender with different materials and their accessories, and I think this is a really cool idea that felt really natural. So, cover is trying to escape here. But yeah, I had a really great time with this, and if you're looking for a great sci-fi romance, I would definitely pick this one up. So now we're going to get into a bunch of 5-star books here. And the first one I'll talk about is Shiver by Allie Reynolds. So this is an adult thriller, and we follow Milla as she goes to this ski resort in the off-season to meet with some old friends. But once they arrive, they all realize something is wrong and that they're trapped. So there's this game that's meant to remind them of another friend who vanished on that same mountain years ago when they were all competitive snowboarders. So this was so much fun. Oh my god, I loved this so much. I figured I would, but I was so excited to see that I did have such a great time with this. We do have 2 timelines here. We have this present timeline where they're obviously, trying to figure out what's going on and who did this to them and, how do they escape. But we have this past timeline as well, and this really focuses on their time as, competitive boarders and what actually happened that fateful day when Saskia disappeared. So I think this was very tense and fast-paced. Both timelines were interesting to me for different reasons. I think the present is very exciting with just this mystery, but the past was this really awesome competition element. I think it's really immersive, and we have this huge toxic rivalry between Milla and Saskia. I really liked just learning, what all happened all those years ago, and I didn't really guess everything, so that was nice to, keep me on my toes. I was really satisfied with these reveals overall. I think it's really atmospheric. It's certainly at this mountain in the present timeline. It's cold and isolated. There's lots of hazards around, these, crevasses. There's treacherous terrain. It certainly makes it not easy to escape, and that just increases the tension level so much. This past timeline, this competition element is extremely well done. It's very realistic, and that makes sense. The author was actually a competitive boarder herself, so, a lot of this is very realistic, and I think I talked about this when I was first, when I did my new book releases video that featured this, but I actually was a ski racer myself, so a lot of these elements, obviously skiing and snowboarding is not the same, but, the gear that you wear, I recognized a lot of the brands, and I was like, oh, hey, yeah, I also have a Rossignol hat, it's super fun stuff like that I just really appreciated, and, I think the competition elements were done well, and, the tricks that people do, that was very realistic, and just, the terminology, but also just, the general lifestyle, and, what they wear to go out, again, that was really well done. The characters in general, some of them are kind of more likable than others, but they do make some bad choices that hurt others. I think Milla is mostly decent, but she is super competitive, and that's not always a good thing. I really liked all the character dynamics here. It's a very tangled web with lots of sexual tension in general, so it made for some really interesting reading, and I had a fantastic time with this. So if you're looking for sort of this isolated close circle murder mystery / locker room mystery type vibe, I would definitely suggest picking this up. The next 5-star book I'll talk about is Firebreak by Nocle Kornher-Stace. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out May 4th. So this is an adult sci-fi that's kind of in this post-apocalyptic type setting after this corporate war where things like power and water are regulated. We follow Mal, who is a VR gamer, as she plays this game and, catches glimpses of the Spec Ops operatives, but she discovers this conspiracy that this corporation may have abducted kids and turned them into super soldiers. So this was so good. Oh my god, I love this so much. It's really full of action. We have exciting moments within the VR game itself, but we also have like this really fantastic exploration of what's going on in the real world, and all of it really builds up to make like this epic conclusion that I just was totally here for. I think generally this book is fundamentally about human rights. We do have this setting where most of the US is now underwater and these two corporations basically control everything. Mal actually has to share a room that's like this hotel room with 8 other people, and they live in this old town area where people can like barely afford water to stay alive. The corporations are definitely doing some shady things with these operatives. I really liked learning about all these like nefarious things that are going on, and following Mal as she tries to make things right and just stand up for justice and human rights was really just such a great journey. I think we also get to explore the power of social media here. Like, we obviously have this VR game element, and so we do have people who, subscribe to her feed and fund her. So this obviously like helps provide Mal with income and water. And so then we have like this other use of social media as a tool to get like the truth out there, despite these corporations trying to block this information. I think generally with this VR game element, it's done really well. I think it's very believable. And, I do play video games myself, so I did not really have any problems following it. But I think even for non-gamers, this should be easy enough to follow. And I think this book will probably be compared with Ready Player One because of these elements. And, it obviously does share some aspects with like this kind of post-apocalyptic type setting and the VR game. But I think this is done so much better, and like I would highly recommend this one. We also have like some fun giant mechs, so that's awesome. In terms of the characters, I really liked Mal, our main character. We do have some own voices representation with her being asexual and aromantic, so that was really nice to see. She is an orphan of this war and, could have become one of these soldiers, so I think that makes for some really interesting kind of internal reflection. She is a bit antisocial and, doesn't always know how to talk to people, but she is a really good person. I liked how, with this book, romance is really not the focus here, and instead we focus a lot more on like friendships and bonds between our characters. In particular, we have Jessa, who is a really great and loyal friend who stands by Mal, and I just really liked their friendship overall. Of course, we have to mention the super soldiers, and I really liked uncovering their real identities and comparing them to how they act in the VR game, because basically, like, the corporation has kind of programmed in these soldiers into the VR game, and, like, they're supposed to share some elements, but, the personalities don't always match up. There's 2 operatives in particular that we focus on, 22 and 6, and they're both, kind of mysterious, but I liked seeing their humanity as the book progresses. So there are some content warnings here for things like torture, gas attacks, water rationing, injustice, but overall, I think this was a really fantastic book and I would highly recommend it. The next 5-star book I'll talk about is Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells. So this is the 6th installment of the Murderbot Diaries, and I did receive this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out April 27th. So this is an adult sci-fi novella following Murderbot, who is this self-aware security unit, as it helps station security investigate a murder. I absolutely adore Murderbot, and so I'm like always happy to get any new installments in this series. But I think this plot in particular was really exciting. We have some great action scenes and fun moments talking to other bots. The investigation itself actually went in a direction I didn't expect, but I really ended up loving it. This is obviously like quick to read being a novella, but I think the length was pretty appropriate for this particular story. The ending is also just like really spectacular, and I feel like I had some chills reading it. It's like, oh yes, this is so cool. I just adore Murderbot so much. It is very funny and antisocial, and generally, like over the course of the books, it talks about how it just wants to be left alone so that it can consume its media, which I'm like, yeah, relatable. But I just love the asides that it has in the story. It's like a lot of things kind of told in parentheses, and I think this provides a lot of opportunity for some really fun, snarky moments, which I'm totally here for. Obviously, over the course of the book, we've gotten a lot of development here, but I think Murderbot does seem like it's taking charge more and accepting that it actually does like to help. And, we definitely have people who still don't necessarily trust Murderbot, but it's really nice to see Murderbot just continue to try to work with humans to do the right thing. Something that has always kind of stood out for me as a big strong point in these books is just Murderbot's interaction with the other bots. And we do get some new bots here, so I like seeing just the different functions that they have and their different intelligence levels and how Murderbot has to interact with them differently based on that. And it's also just cool to see how Murderbot interacts with other bots versus interacts with other humans. And I think just that difference is really, fun to read about. So yes, I am always here for more Murderbot. I definitely recommend this series, and I just cannot wait for the next installment. The last book I'll talk about today is obviously another 5-star book, and that's Day Zero by C. Robert Cargill. So I did receive this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out May 18th. This is an adult sci-fi book that's actually a prequel to his Sea of Rust book, and basically here we're following the robot uprising. So we follow Pounce, who is this tiger AI, as he must decide whether to join the robots or protect his 8-year-old charge. So this was just absolutely amazing. So I haven't actually read Sea of Rust, and will definitely be doing so now, but I didn't really feel lost at all jumping into this. I think it probably does help that this is technically the prequel to Sea of Rust, and I think this feels like it would be fine as a standalone book, but I'm certainly really curious to find out what happens in terms of the aftermath of these events. So this was a very intense book overall, and I think it would actually make a really fantastic movie or show as well, because I could just easily picture everything happening. We have these kind of grand action scenes, and I think this makes a lot of sense because the author is also a screenwriter. I think the book really doesn't let up at all, and I was just obsessively reading it the entire time. We have some, again, really great action scenes, but we also have this one moment in particular that really stood out as an exciting turning point in the book for me, and it was just a big oh my god moment, and it was so wonderful. I just absolutely loved this bond between Pounce and Ezra. Pounce has a lot of questions about free will versus, his programming, and I liked seeing his internal debate over the course of the book. I think these are some big questions, but it turned out pretty sweet overall. I just really love how protective Pounce is of Ezra, and it kind of reminded me of this robot Calvin and Hobbes dynamic, which is just so awesome. I love Calvin and Hobbes, so this was just such a cool thing to see here. Pounce definitely has some tough choices, but it feels a lot like a what won't you do for your child situation. So it feels all very realistic in terms of some of the other characters. With humanity, it's obviously this mixture of good and bad. I think most of them do kind of view robots as possessions. So I think it brings up a lot of really interesting moments with rights of artificial intelligence, which is something I always love reading about. Some of the robots actually seem more human than the humans do. And of course, not all bots are good though, certainly because some of them want to rise up to overthrow humanity. There's some brutal scenes here, but I think they really work well to emphasize this storyline. So yeah, I just absolutely loved this and would highly recommend it. I'll definitely be checking out more books, especially Sea of Rust, I'm super interested in that now. And just kind of as a fun little aside, the chapter numbering is actually done in binary, so I thought that was a really fun little touch. So with that, those are all the books that I've finished since last time, and I am currently reading He Started It by Samantha Downing, and this is an adult thriller about this really messed up family, and they're on a car trip. I'm 50 pages into it, and I'm very curious to see what happens here. I think, I've read My Lovely Wife by her and really liked it, but it's kind of, I think, the same sort of thing where our characters are not necessarily going to be the most likable protagonists. So I'm curious to see what else is going on here. So I am currently participating in the Because We Can Readathon, and I have, after He Started It, 2 more books to finish, and that's Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas and The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichec. So I'm really excited to get to those. Hopefully I could actually finish them in a timely manner, but I also just bought some really exciting books, so I guess I'm going to have to do a book haul at some point soon because, oops. With that, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, have you ever gone skiing or snowboarding? So I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link is in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.